In the fading light of an African savanna, a silhouette appears on the horizon. Massive, ancient, moving with a grace that seems to defy its size. The elephant, a creature so familiar, yet so endlessly mysterious. Tonight, we'll step into their world, into a realm of intelligence, emotion, and wonder that may change the way you see these magnificent beings forever. Welcome to Bedtime Biology, where science meets serenity. Each night, we explore the quiet wonders of the natural world, calming your mind and sparking your curiosity. When you picture an elephant, what image comes to mind? Perhaps the iconic silhouette against an orange African sunset, or maybe the gentle giants working alongside humans in the forests of Asia. But did you know that what we casually call elephants actually represents 3 distinct species, each with its own story, its own adaptations, and its own place in the tapestry of life on Earth? The elephant family today consists of 3 recognized species. The African savanna elephant, the largest land animal on our planet, roams the open grasslands and woodlands of sub-Saharan Africa. The African forest elephant, smaller and more elusive, navigates the dense rainforests of Central and West Africa. And the Asian elephant, the only surviving species of its genus, inhabits the forests and grasslands of 13 countries across South and Southeast Asia. Until the year 2000, scientists grouped both African species together, but detailed genetic studies revealed they are as different from each other as lions are from tigers. In 2010, this distinction was officially recognized, and in 2021, their conservation statuses were finally assessed separately, revealing the urgent crisis facing these magnificent animals. Let's begin with the giants of the savanna. The African savanna elephant stands as the undisputed champion of terrestrial mammals. Males can reach heights exceeding 4 meters at the shoulder and weigh up to 8,000 kilograms. To put this in perspective, that's roughly the weight of 100 adult humans. Their massive bodies are supported by pillar-like legs, and their skin, though thick, is deeply wrinkled and textured. These wrinkles aren't just for show. Research has revealed that the crevices in their skin help retain water and moisture, protecting them from the intense heat of the African sun and preventing dehydration as they traverse vast, arid landscapes. The most immediately recognizable feature of the African savanna elephant is its enormous ears. Shaped remarkably like the African continent itself, these ears can measure up to 2 meters across. They serve multiple critical functions. First and foremost, they act as radiators. The thin skin on the ears is laced with blood vessels, and as elephants flap them, blood flowing through these vessels cools in the breeze before returning to the body, helping regulate their temperature in the scorching heat. The ears also serve as communication tools. And elephant may spread its ears wide to appear larger and more intimidating when threatened, or hold them relaxed when at ease. The African savanna elephant's head has a single, smooth dome, giving it a rounded appearance. Both males and females typically grow tusks, those magnificent extensions of incisor teeth that can curve outward and reach impressive lengths. Tusks are tools of survival, used for digging, stripping bark, moving objects, and defense. Unfortunately, they're also the reason these elephants have been hunted to the brink of extinction in many regions. Each elephant shows a preference for using one tusk over the other, much like humans are left or right-handed, and the preferred tusk is often more worn down from constant use. Their trunks end in 2 finger-like projections, allowing them exceptional dexterity when manipulating objects. This dual-fingered tip enables them to pick up items as small as a single blade of grass, or as large as a fallen tree branch. The skin on different parts of their body varies dramatically in thickness. While it can be 2 to 3 centimeters thick on their backs and sides, it's paper thin behind their ears and around their eyes, making these areas particularly vulnerable to sunburn and insect bites. Now, let's venture into the shadows of the forest, where a different giant dwells. The African forest elephant is smaller than its savanna cousin, with males rarely exceeding 2.5 meters in height and weighing around 2,700 kilograms. But don't let the word smaller fool you. These are still formidable animals, perfectly adapted to their dense, shadowy world. Their ears are more oval-shaped and proportionally smaller than those of savanna elephants. This adaptation makes sense when you consider their habitat. In the thick humidity of the rainforest, cooling isn't as critical as it is on the open savanna. Their heads share the single-domed structure of savanna elephants, but their tusks tell a different story. Forest elephant tusks are straighter and point more downward, an adaptation that helps them navigate through dense vegetation without getting caught on branches and vines. Perhaps most fascinating is their relationship with the forest itself. Forest elephants are fruit specialists. They seek out the ripest, most nutrient-rich fruits, consuming them whole and later depositing the seeds in their nutrient-packed dung kilometers away. They're not just inhabitants of the forest, they're architects of it, dispersing seeds that would never travel so far on their own, allowing trees to colonize new areas and creating the very forests they depend on. Recent research has shown that forest elephants play an irreplaceable role in carbon storage. The trees whose seeds they disperse tend to be larger species with denser wood, which store more carbon. Without forest elephants, these forests would fundamentally change, storing less carbon and contributing less to the fight against climate change. The African forest elephant's skin is smoother than the savanna elephant's, an adaptation to the more humid environment. They spend much of their time in the deep forest, emerging into clearings to socialize, drink, and feed on minerals. These clearing gatherings offer researchers rare glimpses into their social lives, revealing complex interactions and relationships that mirror those of their savanna cousins, yet with subtle differences shaped by their secretive lifestyle. Now, let's journey across continents to Asia, where the third species makes its home. The Asian elephant is smaller still, with males averaging around 2.7 meters tall and weighing approximately 4,000 kilograms. They're the only surviving species of the genus Elephas, a lineage that once included numerous species spread across Asia and beyond. Asian elephants have smaller, more rounded ears, shaped somewhat like the Indian subcontinent. These ears reflect their primarily forested habitat, where the climate is more temperate and cooling is less of a constant concern. Their heads are distinctive, featuring a twin-domed structure with a visible indentation running down the middle. This gives their foreheads a unique appearance, immediately distinguishable from African elephants if you know what to look for. Tusks in Asian elephants present one of the most striking differences between the species. Only some males develop prominent tusks. Many males, and the vast majority of females, have much smaller tusks called tushes, which don't extend beyond their lips and contain no pulp inside. This difference may have evolved due to various environmental and social pressures. But it's also saved countless Asian elephants from poachers who have less incentive to kill elephants without valuable ivory. The tips of Asian elephant trunks have only one finger-like projection compared to the two found on African elephants. To compensate, Asian elephants rely more on wrapping their trunks around objects, using the entire appendage as a grasping tool. Their skin tends to be smoother and more speckled with pink depigmentation, especially around the ears, trunk, and face. This depigmentation is completely normal and natural, varying from individual to individual. Asian elephants inhabit a remarkable variety of landscapes across 13 countries, from the dense rainforests of Sumatra to the grasslands of India, from the bamboo forests of China to the swamps of Sri Lanka. More than half of all wild Asian elephants live in India alone, but their range is highly fragmented. Unlike the vast, connected landscapes some African elephants still enjoy, Asian elephants often live in isolated pockets of habitat, surrounded by human development. This fragmentation poses severe challenges for their long-term survival, limiting genetic diversity and increasing human-elephant conflict. The Asian elephant's feet also differ from those of African species. They typically have 5 toenails on their front feet and 4 on their back feet, while African elephants usually have 4 on the front and 3 on the back. This might seem like a trivial detail, but it reflects the deep evolutionary divergence between these species. Asian and African elephants have been evolving separately for millions of years, developing distinct adaptations to their respective environments. In temperament and behavior, the 3 species show both remarkable similarities and subtle differences. All 3 live in matriarchal societies, form deep emotional bonds, exhibit extraordinary intelligence, and show complex social behaviors. Yet, their specific social structures vary. African savanna elephants tend to form larger herds and have more fluid associations between family groups. African forest elephants live in smaller, more intimate family units, a reflection of the limited visibility and resources in their dense habitat. Asian elephants show the most variability, with some populations forming tight family groups, while others have looser associations, likely influenced by habitat quality and human disturbance. Understanding these 3 species as distinct entities is crucial for conservation. Each faces unique threats and requires tailored conservation strategies. The African forest elephant, now listed as critically endangered, has suffered catastrophic population declines, losing over 86% of its numbers since 1990. The African savanna elephant, listed as endangered, has declined by 60% in the same period. The Asian elephant, also endangered, has fewer than 50,000 individuals remaining in the wild, occupying only 15% of its historic range. These aren't just statistics. Each number represents family groups fractured by poaching, ancient migration routes cut off by human development, and ecosystems losing their keystones. The 3 elephant species are not interchangeable. They're distinct evolutionary lineages, each irreplaceable, each deserving of our attention and protection. As we continue our journey tonight, we'll explore what makes these gentle giants so extraordinary. We'll dive into the mechanics of their incredible trunks, the complexity of their minds, the depth of their emotions, and the critical roles they play in their ecosystems. We'll discover why elephants are so much more than just large animals, why they're among the most intelligent, emotionally complex, and ecologically important creatures on Earth. But first, let's understand the remarkable anatomy that allows these giants to thrive. If you were asked to name the most extraordinary appendage in the animal kingdom, what would you choose? The chameleon's projectile tongue, the octopus's flexible arms, the giraffe's impossibly long neck. All worthy candidates, certainly. But there's one appendage that stands alone in its versatility, complexity, and sheer elegance of design. The elephant's trunk. The trunk is not simply a nose, though it functions as one. It's not merely an arm, though it grasps and manipulates like one. It's a fusion of the upper lip and nose, an evolutionary marvel that combines the functions of breath, smell, touch, sound production, and manipulation into a single, boneless appendage. To call it remarkable would be a profound understatement. Let's begin with the numbers, because sometimes numbers can capture what words struggle to convey. An elephant's trunk contains approximately 40,000 individual muscles. To put this in perspective, the entire human body has around 600 muscles. That's right. An elephant's trunk alone has more than 60 times as many muscles as your entire body. These muscles are arranged in intricate patterns, creating a structure that's both incredibly powerful and exquisitely precise. Recent research using high-resolution computed tomography scans has revealed just how complex this muscular architecture truly is. The muscles don't run in simple, parallel bundles. Instead, they're arranged in elaborate, interwoven patterns. Some muscles run longitudinally along the trunk's length, allowing it to extend and retract. Others run radially, encircling the trunk like rings, enabling it to contract and become more rigid. Still, others run in oblique patterns, creating the rotational movements that give the trunk its remarkable flexibility. This muscular hydrostat design means the trunk maintains constant volume regardless of its shape. When it elongates, it becomes thinner. When it contracts, it becomes thicker. There are no bones to provide structure, no joints to create pivot points. The trunk's shape is determined entirely by which muscles contract and which relax, allowing for an almost infinite number of possible configurations. The trunk's surface tells its own story. The skin is covered in wrinkles and folds, but these aren't uniform. The dorsal surface, the top of the trunk, has deep folds that allow it to stretch significantly more than the ventral surface, the bottom. Research has shown that the dorsal skin can extend up to 15% more than the ventral skin. This asymmetry is functional. When an elephant reaches down to grasp food or water, the trunk naturally bends downward, and those dorsal folds unfold, allowing for greater reach without straining the skin. The ventral surface, meanwhile, has wrinkles rather than folds. These wrinkles increase friction, much like the wrinkles in human and primate hands improve grip. Elephants commonly use the ventral surface of their trunks to wrap around and carry objects, so this additional friction makes perfect sense. The trunk's skin is also studded with thousands of sensory hairs, especially concentrated around the tip. These hairs are exquisitely sensitive, allowing elephants to detect even the slightest touch and to feel textures with remarkable precision. At the tip of the trunk, we find those finger-like projections. African elephants have two, while Asian elephants have one. These projections are incredibly dexterous. Elephants can use them to pick up objects as small as a single coin, as delicate as a piece of straw, or as oddly shaped as a pebble. They can thread their trunk tip through narrow openings, pluck individual leaves from branches, and manipulate objects with a precision that rivals our own hands. But the trunk isn't just about manipulation, it's the elephant's primary sensory organ. Inside the trunk run 2 nostrils, extending all the way from the tip to the lungs. An elephant's sense of smell is extraordinary, far exceeding that of a bloodhound. They can detect water sources from several kilometers away, identify individual elephants by scent alone, and recognize whether a path was recently traveled by elephants they know or by strangers. When investigating something, elephants raise their trunks high, sampling the air currents for scents. The trunk's mobility allows them to position their nostrils optimally to catch even faint odors. They can also use their trunks to touch objects, gently exploring shapes and textures, learning about their environment through tactile investigation. The trunk is also essential for feeding and drinking. Elephants use their trunks to pluck leaves, strip bark, pull up grass, and dig for roots. They can be remarkably selective, choosing specific plants or even specific parts of plants based on nutritional content or palatability. When drinking, an elephant doesn't sip water through its trunk like a straw. Instead, it sucks water up into the trunk, holding as much as 8 liters, then curls the trunk toward its mouth and releases the water, squirting it into its mouth. Watching an elephant drink is like watching a perfectly choreographed dance, repeated dozens of times until the animal's thirst is quenched. Young elephants take years to fully master trunk control. Baby elephants often seem confused by their trunks, which flop and swing seemingly of their own accord. They can be seen stepping on their own trunks, trying to suck their trunks much like human babies suck their thumbs, and generally fumbling with this unwieldy appendage. By around 1 year of age, they develop lateralization, showing a preference for using one side of their trunk over the other, much like humans develop handedness. Mastery comes with practice, and by the time they reach adolescence, they've transformed their trunks into the precise, versatile tools that define elephant life. The trunk's uses extend to social interactions. Elephants greet each other by intertwining trunks, gently touching each other's mouths and tusks, and even placing trunk tips in each other's mouths, in a gesture that communicates trust and affection. A mother guides her calf with gentle trunk touches, and elephants comfort distressed herd members with reassuring trunk contact. The trunk can also be a weapon. An angry elephant can use its trunk to throw objects, push rivals, or strike threats with surprising force. Elephants can also produce sounds with their trunks. The iconic trumpet call is created by blowing air forcefully through the trunk while using the vocal cords. But elephants also make softer sounds, rumbles and hums that carry over long distances, many of them below the range of human hearing. These infrasonic calls can travel for kilometers, allowing elephants to communicate with herd members far beyond visual range. Now, let's turn our attention to another remarkable feature: the elephant's ears. While the trunk gets most of the attention, the ears are equally fascinating in their form and function. As we've already noted, African elephants have much larger ears than Asian elephants, a direct adaptation to their respective climates. But the ears do more than just regulate temperature. The large surface area of African elephant ears contains an intricate network of blood vessels. As blood flows through these vessels near the skin's surface, heat dissipates into the air, especially when the elephant flaps its ears to create airflow. This system is remarkably effective. Studies have shown that elephants can lower their body temperature by several degrees simply through ear flapping. In the intense heat of the African savanna, this cooling mechanism is essential for survival. But ears also play crucial roles in communication and social signaling. When an elephant is relaxed and calm, its ears hang loosely against its neck. When alert or curious, the ears perk up and orient toward the source of interest, like biological radar dishes. When threatened or aggressive, an elephant may spread its ears wide, creating a much larger visual profile to intimidate rivals or predators. The ears also help gather sound, though elephants rely more on ground vibrations and infrasonic communication than on airborne sounds in the range humans can hear. Interestingly, each elephant's ears are unique, with distinct patterns of veins, nicks, tears, and scars. Researchers use these patterns like fingerprints to identify individual elephants in the wild, tracking them across years and documenting their life histories. The skin itself deserves attention. Elephants are pachyderms, a term meaning thick-skinned, and indeed, their skin can be 2 to 3 centimeters thick in places. Yet despite this thickness, elephant skin is remarkably sensitive. Elephants can feel a fly landing on their back and will immediately swish their tail or use their trunk to brush it away. This sensitivity seems contradictory, but it makes sense when you consider that the skin contains numerous nerve endings, particularly in thinner areas. The wrinkled, creviced texture of elephant skin serves multiple purposes. Those deep wrinkles hold moisture and mud, creating a protective layer against the sun and against biting insects. Elephants often wallow in mud or spray dust over themselves, and these materials lodge in the skin's crevices, forming a kind of natural sunscreen and insect repellent. The skin also helps with thermoregulation. Its large surface area, increased even more by the wrinkles, allows for effective heat dissipation. Elephant skin continuously sheds and regenerates, though much more slowly than human skin. The outer layer becomes dry and flaky, and elephants help this process along by scratching against trees, rolling in dust, and rubbing against rocks. This behavior isn't just maintenance, it's also social. Elephants will scratch and rub against each other, reinforcing social bonds while taking care of their skin. The color of elephant skin varies from dark grey to brown, with African elephants generally appearing greyer and Asian elephants showing more brown tones. However, the apparent color often depends more on the local soil than on the skin itself. Elephants that bathe regularly in red soil will appear reddish. Those that frequent areas with grey dust will appear grey. The depigmentation patches on Asian elephants, those pink areas around the ears and trunk, are perfectly normal and vary greatly between individuals. Let's not forget the tusks, those magnificent and tragic appendages. Tusks are specialized incisor teeth, continuously growing throughout an elephant's life. They're composed primarily of dentine, the same material that makes up the bulk of human teeth, coated with a thin layer of enamel at the tip that wears away with use. Unlike antlers, which are shed and regrown annually, tusks are permanent, growing slowly but steadily from root to tip. Tusks serve multiple functions. Elephants use them to dig for water, minerals, and roots. They pry bark from trees, lift and carry objects, and clear paths through dense vegetation. Male elephants use their tusks in competition and combat, pushing and wrestling with rivals. In times of drought, elephants use their tusks to dig into dry riverbeds, creating waterholes that benefit countless other species. The tragedy is that these tools of survival have made elephants targets. Ivory, prized for its beauty and workability, has driven the slaughter of millions of elephants. In the 1980s, an estimated 100,000 elephants were killed every year for their tusks. Though international bans and conservation efforts have reduced poaching in some areas, it remains a severe threat, particularly for African forest elephants, who have some of the most valuable ivory due to its hardness and pink tint. Some elephant populations are showing evolutionary responses to poaching pressure. In areas where poaching has been intense, a higher proportion of elephants are now born tuskless, a genetic trait that was once rare. While this adaptation may help them survive poachers, it also means they've lost important tools, potentially affecting their ability to access certain food sources and minerals. The elephant's feet, while less celebrated than trunks or ears, are engineering marvels in their own right. Each foot is essentially a pillar, designed to support tremendous weight. The bones are arranged vertically, stacking one atop another to transfer weight directly to the ground. But the feet aren't rigid. They're cushioned by a fatty pad beneath the heel, which acts as a shock absorber and helps distribute weight evenly. This pad compresses under the elephant's weight, spreading out to create a larger surface area and reducing ground pressure. When the elephant lifts its foot, the pad springs back to its original shape. This design allows elephants to walk almost silently despite their massive size. That cushioning foot pad dampens vibrations and sound, making it possible for elephants to move through their environment with surprising stealth. Indigenous peoples in elephant habitats speak of elephants appearing suddenly, materializing from the forest or savanna, seemingly out of nowhere. Their approach unheard until they're already close. The feet are also incredibly sensitive to ground vibrations. Elephants can detect seismic signals through their feet and likely through their trunks as well. When one elephant produces a low-frequency rumble, it travels not just through the air, but through the ground. Other elephants, even kilometers away, can pick up these vibrations, allowing for long-distance communication that's nearly impossible for humans to intercept without specialized equipment. Every aspect of elephant anatomy reflects millions of years of evolution, fine-tuning these animals for their ecological roles. The trunk that can both uproot a tree and caress a newborn calf. The ears that cool the body and communicate emotion. The skin that protects yet remains sensitive. The tusks that dig for water and provide sustenance. The feet that support tons of weight while treading silently and sensing distant messages. These physical adaptations are impressive, but they're only part of the story. What truly sets elephants apart, what makes them so captivating to scientists and laypeople alike, is what lies inside that massive skull, one of the most complex brains in the animal kingdom. The phrase, "elephants never forget," has become so common it borders on cliché. But like many clichés, it contains a profound truth. Elephants possess memory capabilities that rival, and in some ways exceed, those of any other non-human animal. But memory is just the beginning. To understand the elephant mind is to recognize an intelligence that operates on multiple levels, encompassing problem-solving, emotional understanding, social knowledge, and perhaps even elements of what we might call wisdom. Let's start with the brain itself, that pale, convoluted mass of tissue that sits protected within the elephant's massive skull. An adult elephant brain weighs approximately 5 kilograms, making it the largest brain of any land animal. In absolute terms, it's more than 4 times heavier than a human brain. However, brain size alone tells us little about intelligence. Whales have even larger brains, yet their cognitive abilities, while impressive, differ markedly from those of elephants or humans. What matters more than absolute size is the structure and organization of the brain, particularly the cerebral cortex, that folded outer layer where higher cognitive functions reside. Here, elephants shine. They possess not only one of the largest cerebral cortices, but also one of the most highly convoluted. The folds and wrinkles, called gyri and sulci, dramatically increase surface area, packing more neurons into the available space. In terms of cortical neurons, the cells responsible for processing information and generating thoughts, elephants hold an impressive position. Estimates suggest they have around 5.6 billion neurons in their cerebral cortex. That's more than most other animals, though fewer than humans, who have around 16 billion. Chimpanzees, often held up as cognitive champions, have about 7 billion. Dolphins, another frequently cited example of animal intelligence, have around 5.8 billion. But raw neuron counts don't tell the whole story either. What's fascinating about elephant brains is where those neurons are located. A staggering 97.5% of an elephant's neurons are located in the cerebellum, the part of the brain traditionally associated with motor control and coordination. This is a much higher proportion than in humans or other primates, and it initially puzzled scientists. Why would so much processing power be devoted to movement? The answer likely relates to the trunk. That boneless appendage, with its infinite degrees of freedom and extraordinary precision, requires immense neural resources to control. Processing tactile information from 40,000 muscles, coordinating those muscles to perform delicate manipulations, and integrating trunk movements with visual and olfactory information demands significant computational power. The elephant's cerebellum isn't just controlling simple movements, it's orchestrating one of the most sophisticated sensory motor systems in nature. Despite this cerebellar emphasis, elephants excel in cognitive tasks that require higher order thinking. Their hippocampus, the brain structure crucial for memory formation and spatial navigation, is exceptionally large and well developed. The elephant hippocampus takes up about 0.7% of the brain's central structures, compared to 0.5% in humans. This enlarged hippocampus likely underlies their extraordinary memory capabilities. Studies of wild elephants have provided compelling evidence of this memory in action. In Kenya's Amboseli region, researchers have documented elephants recognizing the voices of more than 100 different individuals in their population. When researchers played recordings of elephant calls, elephants responded differently based on who was calling and whether that individual was friend, family, or stranger. Even more remarkably, they could distinguish between recorded calls of elephants they hadn't seen in years, suggesting that elephant memory for individuals can span decades. One famous study involved playing recordings of deceased elephants to their former families. When elephants heard the voice of a long-dead family member, they showed clear signs of recognition and distress, calling out and searching for the individual. This suggests not only that elephants remember specific individuals for years after death, but also that they may understand at some level that death is permanent and that those individuals are gone. Memory extends beyond social recognition. elephants remember locations critical to their survival. Matriarchs, the family leaders, accumulate decades of knowledge about their home ranges. They remember where water sources can be found in different seasons, which routes are safest during migration, where the best feeding grounds are located, and where dangers lurk. This knowledge is crucial during droughts or other crises. Research in Tanzania documented a severe drought where elephant families led by older matriarchs had significantly higher survival rates than families led by younger, less experienced matriarchs. The older matriarchs remembered drought refuges from previous dry periods, some of which hadn't been used in 30 years. They led their families to these distant water sources, saving lives through memory alone. The younger matriarchs, lacking this accumulated knowledge, made less optimal decisions, resulting in higher calf mortality. This finding has profound implications for elephant populations targeted by poaching. When poachers kill the oldest, largest elephants, those with the most impressive tusks, they're not just removing individuals. They're destroying libraries of knowledge, severing links to the past that can't be replaced. Younger elephants can grow up and become matriarchs, but they can't magically gain the decades of experience that the previous matriarch possessed. Population-level knowledge is being lost, potentially making entire populations more vulnerable to environmental challenges. Beyond memory, elephants demonstrate problem-solving abilities that speak to their cognitive flexibility. In controlled studies, elephants have shown they understand basic physics. They know that objects need support from below to remain stable. They recognize that vertical obstacles are more effective barriers than horizontal ones. They can use tools, sometimes modifying them for specific purposes. One elegant experiment tested whether elephants understand cooperation. 2 elephants were presented with a platform containing food, but the platform could only be pulled closer using a rope that required both elephants to pull simultaneously. If only one elephant pulled, the rope would simply slip through the apparatus and the food would remain out of reach. The elephants quickly understood this requirement. When released together, they cooperated, pulling in unison to retrieve the food. When released separately with a delay, the first elephant would wait for its partner to arrive before pulling, demonstrating not just cooperation, but an understanding that cooperation was necessary. Another remarkable aspect of elephant cognition is their apparent understanding of death, a trait once thought unique to humans. Elephants show intense interest in elephant carcasses, often investigating them thoroughly with their trunks, touching bones, and sometimes carrying them away. They show particular fascination with skulls and tusks, perhaps because these are the elements that would have been most familiar during life, touched during trunk-to-mouth greetings. When an elephant dies, family members often remain with the body, sometimes for days. They may touch it gently, vocalize, and show signs of distress. In some cases, elephants have been observed attempting to cover bodies with vegetation and soil, creating a kind of burial. While we must be cautious about anthropomorphism, interpreting animal behavior through our own emotional lens, the consistency and complexity of these responses suggests that elephants have some conceptual understanding that death represents a fundamental change, a permanent absence. Elephants also exhibit behaviors that suggest theory of mind, the ability to understand that other individuals have their own thoughts, knowledge, and perspectives. They seem to recognize when another elephant is distressed and respond appropriately. They adjust their behavior based on what others know or have experienced. They appear to deceive others deliberately in competitive situations. One anecdotal account, though not from a controlled study, illustrates this well. Rangers in a South African park noticed that elephants had learned to disable electric fences by dropping logs on them, shorting them out. But they didn't do this randomly. They only targeted fences when they wanted to access areas beyond them, suggesting not just problem solving, but planning and intentionality. Elephants have also demonstrated self-awareness, passing the mirror test, a classic assessment of self-recognition. In this test, an animal is marked with a visible spot while looking in a mirror. If the animal touches the mark on its own body while looking at the reflection, rather than treating the reflection as another individual, it suggests self-recognition. Elephants, along with great apes, dolphins, and magpies, have passed this test, using their trunks to touch marks on their own foreheads after seeing their reflection. This self-awareness likely relates to their sophisticated social cognition. To navigate complex elephant societies, individuals need to track relationships, remember interactions, recognize dominance hierarchies, and understand their own role within the group. This requires not just intelligence, but social intelligence, the ability to understand and predict the behavior of others based on their likely thoughts, emotions, and motivations. Communication is another window into elephant cognition. Elephants have one of the most complex communication systems in the animal kingdom, using vocalizations, body language, chemical signals, and even seismic vibrations. Their vocal repertoire is extensive, ranging from loud trumpets and roars that carry for kilometers to soft rumbles and purrs used in close-range communication. Many of these sounds are infrasonic, below the range of human hearing. These low-frequency rumbles can travel enormous distances, especially in the still air of evening and early morning, when atmospheric conditions are most favorable. Researchers have documented elephants communicating over distances of more than 10 kilometers using these calls. This long-distance communication allows separated family groups to coordinate movements, helps males locate receptive females, and enables elephants to warn others of dangers. But elephant communication goes beyond vocalizations. They're masters of body language. The position of the ears, the angle of the trunk, the tension in the body, the movements of the tail, all convey information. A relaxed elephant has loose, swaying movements and a trunk that explores leisurely. A tense elephant has a rigid body, tight muscles, and a trunk held still or curled defensively. An aggressive elephant may spread its ears, raise its head, and make a mock charge, communicating its displeasure with unmistakable clarity. Chemical communication through scent is also important, particularly in reproduction. Female elephants in estrus release pheromones that males can detect from great distances. Males produce their own scent signals, particularly when in must, a period of elevated testosterone and sexual activity. Elephants constantly gather chemical information through their trunks, sampling secretions from temporal glands, urine and feces to learn about an individual's health, reproductive status, and emotional state. The complexity of elephant cognition becomes even clearer when we consider their capacity for learning, not just as individuals, but as a population. Elephants transmit knowledge culturally, passing information from generation to generation. Young elephants learn by watching and imitating adults, a form of social learning that allows innovations to spread through populations. This cultural transmission is particularly evident in foraging. Different elephant populations have developed unique traditions about which plants to eat, how to process certain foods, and where to find resources. In some regions, elephants have learned to raid specific crops. In others, they've learned to avoid certain areas or plants. These traditions aren't innate. They're learned, passed from mothers to daughters across generations, creating regional cultures of knowledge. What's perhaps most humbling about elephant intelligence is how much we still don't understand. For every question answered, new ones emerge. How much do elephants truly understand about death? Do they contemplate the future? Do they have something we might recognize as culture or even rudimentary religion? While we must be careful not to project human concepts onto other species, it's equally important not to underestimate the depth and complexity of elephant minds. As we explore their social lives next, we'll see how this intelligence manifests in the intricate relationships, cooperation, and emotional bonds that define elephant existence. If you were to design the perfect society for an intelligent, long-lived, emotional species living in unpredictable environments, you might well end up with something resembling elephant social structure. Female elephants live their entire lives embedded in a network of relationships, surrounded by sisters, daughters, nieces, cousins, and close friends. Males follow a different path, leaving their birth families in adolescence to navigate adult life largely alone or in loose associations with other males. It's a system that has evolved over millions of years, refined through countless generations into a structure that balances individual needs with group survival. At the heart of every elephant family is the matriarch. She is typically the oldest female, though not always. Matriarchy in elephants isn't a simple matter of age-based dominance. Rather, it's earned leadership. A matriarch must prove herself worthy through wisdom, competence in crisis, knowledge of the territory, and the ability to maintain group cohesion. She must inspire confidence and command respect from her family members. An elephant family typically consists of the matriarch, her adult daughters, her younger offspring, and her daughter's offspring. 3 generations living together, learning from each other, protecting each other. Family sizes vary considerably, from just 3 or 4 individuals in some Asian elephant populations to 20 or more in stable African savanna populations. The size depends partly on habitat quality and partly on family history. Families that have experienced heavy poaching tend to be smaller, their numbers depleted by the loss of key members. The matriarch's role cannot be overstated. She makes critical decisions about when and where to move, where to feed, when to rest, and how to respond to threats. Her experience matters enormously. She remembers past droughts and knows where to find water when surface sources have dried up. She recognizes dangerous situations based on experiences from years or decades ago. She knows the voices and scents of elephants from other families and can make rapid assessments about whether to approach, avoid, or stay alert. But she's not a dictator. Elephant families make decisions through a process that looks remarkably democratic. When it's time to move, the matriarch might begin by making a rumble or starting to walk in a particular direction. Other family members may follow immediately, or they may hesitate, or they may start moving in a different direction. Sometimes the matriarch's suggestion is ignored entirely, and the family goes elsewhere. Other times, especially in critical situations, the family defers to her judgment without question. This decision-making process relies on continuous communication. Elephants are in near constant contact through vocalizations, particularly those low-frequency rumbles we can barely hear or not hear at all. Research has revealed an extraordinary fact. Elephants can produce rumbles that create two distinct sounds simultaneously, one audible and one infrasonic, by vibrating at different structures in their vocal anatomy. This allows them to send complex, layered messages. The social structure extends beyond the immediate family. Groups of related families form what researchers call bond groups. These are typically families descended from a common ancestral matriarch, essentially extended family units. Bond groups associate regularly, feeding together, traveling together, and showing clear affiliative behaviors toward each other. When bond groups meet, the greeting ceremonies can be spectacular, with elephants rumbling, trumpeting, spinning in circles, urinating and defecating, all while touching and entwining trunks in obvious excitement and joy. Multiple bond groups that share overlapping ranges and interact regularly make up what's called a clan. At this level, relationships are more fluid and less defined, but still meaningful. Elephants from the same clan recognize each other and generally interact peacefully, though they may not seek each other out specifically. Male elephants experience a completely different social trajectory. Young males remain with their birth families until adolescence, typically around 12 to 15 years old. During this time, they're fully integrated into family life, protected and nurtured by their mothers and other females. But as they mature, something changes. Adult females gradually become less tolerant of maturing males. The young males begin spending more time on the periphery of the family group, foraging independently and testing boundaries. Eventually, they leave entirely, either voluntarily or because they're actively pushed out. This separation is rarely abrupt. Young males often drift away gradually, spending days or weeks away before returning, slowly building independence until they're fully separate. Once independent, males live fundamentally different lives from females. They're more solitary, roaming widely across the landscape. But they're not entirely alone. Males form loose associations with other males, relationships based on proximity and mutual tolerance rather than deep bonds. These male groups are fluid, with individuals coming and going, joining and leaving as circumstances dictate. However, recent research has revealed that male social lives are more complex than previously thought. Young adult males often seek out older, more experienced males, staying near them and apparently learning from them. These mentor relationships seem to help young males navigate the challenges of independence, from foraging strategies to social skills to managing aggressive encounters with other males. Male elephants also experience musth, a remarkable physiological and behavioral state characterized by dramatically elevated testosterone levels, aggressive behavior, and heightened sexual activity. Musth is energetically expensive and occurs periodically, with older, larger males entering musth more frequently and for longer durations. During musth, a male becomes highly aggressive toward other males and actively seeks out receptive females. Non-musth males generally avoid musth males, recognizing their elevated aggression and dominance. When a female comes into estrus, ready to mate, she becomes the center of intense male interest. Males can detect her reproductive state from considerable distances through chemical cues. Multiple males may converge on an estrus female, leading to competition and sometimes violent confrontations between males. Larger males, particularly those in musth, usually win these encounters and secure mating opportunities. After mating, the male moves on. He provides no paternal care and may never interact with his offspring. The female, meanwhile, returns to her family, where she'll receive support throughout her nearly 2-year pregnancy and beyond. This complete absence of paternal investment is balanced by intensive maternal and allomaternal care. Allomaternal care, where individuals other than the mother help care for offspring, is a cornerstone of elephant society. When a calf is born, it immediately becomes the responsibility not just of its mother, but of the entire family. Older sisters, aunts, cousins, and even unrelated females in the group take active roles in protecting, guiding, and teaching the calf. They're called allomothers, and their contribution is crucial for calf survival. Research has shown that calves with more allomothers have higher survival rates. The reasons are clear. A mother with help can spend more time feeding, producing more and better quality milk. The calf has multiple guardians watching for danger. When the mother is occupied with a younger sibling, older allomothers can continue to provide care and guidance. In difficult times, this support network can mean the difference between survival and death. Young females benefit enormously from this system. By helping care for younger siblings and cousins, adolescent females learn essential parenting skills before having their own calves. They learn how to support a wobbly newborn, how to guide a wandering calf back to the group, how to comfort a distressed youngster, and how to discipline inappropriate behavior. This apprenticeship prepares them for their own future as mothers. Communication within these family groups is constant and multi-layered. Beyond vocalizations, elephants communicate through touch, spending considerable time in physical contact. A mother might rest her trunk on her calf's back while walking. Two sisters might stand side by side, leaning against each other while resting. A matriarch might gently guide a youngster away from danger with a touch of her trunk. Trunk-to-mouth greetings are particularly important. When elephants meet, they often insert their trunk tip into each other's mouth, a gesture that allows them to taste each other's secretions and gather information about health, emotional state, and recent activities. It's an intimate gesture, typically reserved for close associates, and one that reinforces social bonds. The complexity of elephant relationships is perhaps most evident in their responses to injury, illness, and death within the group. When a family member is injured or sick, others actively assist. They support individuals who have trouble walking, slow the group's pace to accommodate them, and help them drink and find food. Healthy elephants have been observed propping up injured companions, preventing them from collapsing. Elephants also show remarkable coordination when facing threats. When predators approach, particularly when young calves are present, adults form a protective circle around the vulnerable members, facing outward with tusks ready. If one elephant sounds an alarm, all respond instantly, coordinating their defense without apparent deliberation. This collective response requires sophisticated communication and mutual understanding. The social knowledge required to navigate elephant society is staggering. An elephant must recognize and remember perhaps 100 or more individuals, tracking their relationships, remembering past interactions, understanding their place in various dominance hierarchies, and adjusting behavior appropriately. They must coordinate with family members, maintain relationships with bond group associates, recognize members of other clans, and navigate encounters with strangers, all while managing their own needs and responding to environmental challenges. It's worth emphasizing how different male and female life trajectories are, and how this reflects broader evolutionary strategies. Females invest heavily in cooperative relationships, drawing strength from their families. Their reproductive success depends partly on their own qualities, but also on the quality and size of their support network. Males, in contrast, invest in size, strength, and competitive ability. Their reproductive success depends on outcompeting other males for access to females. These divergent strategies have shaped not just elephant behavior, but elephant anatomy and physiology. Female elephants may live to 60 or even 70 years in favorable conditions. Males typically have shorter lifespans, partly because their solitary lifestyle exposes them to greater dangers, and partly because musth is physiologically demanding. The oldest elephants are invariably females, repositories of decades of accumulated knowledge, living links to the past, whose memories span generations. As we'll see in the next section, this social complexity shapes every stage of elephant life, from the moment of birth through the long years of growth and learning, into the responsibilities of adulthood, and ultimately to old age and death. In the darkness before dawn, in a quiet corner of the savanna away from the main herd, a female elephant stands, muscles tensing, breathing carefully. Around her stand her mother, her sisters, perhaps her own older daughters, a circle of support and protection. Labor has begun. After 22 months of pregnancy, the longest gestation period of any mammal on Earth, a new elephant is about to enter the world. Let's step back for a moment and consider what those 22 months mean. Why does it take so long? The answer lies in the complexity of what's being built. An elephant calf must be born with its brain already highly developed, with cognitive abilities functional from birth, ready to learn, remember, and interact in a complex social world. This extended gestation allows for neurological development that few other animals achieve in utero. But there's another remarkable aspect to elephant pregnancy that researchers only recently discovered. During pregnancy, elephants form multiple structures called corpora lutea on their ovaries. Most mammals form just one corpus luteum, a temporary gland that produces progesterone to maintain pregnancy. Elephants form an average of 5 or 6, sometimes as many as 11. These multiple glands work together to maintain the extraordinarily high progesterone levels needed for such a long pregnancy. This system appears to be an elegant solution to a difficult problem. Instead of developing a single massive corpus luteum that must function flawlessly for 22 months, elephants create multiple smaller ones. If one fails, others compensate, providing redundancy and reliability. It's a physiological strategy as sophisticated as any engineering design. As the birth approaches, the expectant mother becomes restless. She may separate from the main herd, seeking a quieter, more secluded spot, though her closest relatives usually accompany her. Birth itself is typically quick once active labor begins, often lasting just an hour or two. The newborn emerges, enclosed in fetal membranes that quickly rupture. The calf drops to the ground, a fall of perhaps a meter, the first of many shocks to come. The newborn weighs approximately 90 to 110 kilograms and stands about a meter tall at the shoulder. It's covered in a sparse coat of hair, particularly dense on the head and back, and appears gangly and uncoordinated. Within minutes, driven by instinct and encouraged by gentle nudges from its mother and the attending females, the calf struggles to its feet. This is crucial. In the wild, a calf that cannot stand and walk is unlikely to survive. The group cannot wait indefinitely, and a helpless calf would be vulnerable to predators. The family's response to the birth is immediate and intense. They vocalize, touch the newborn with their trunks, and often handle the placenta with apparent fascination, touching and smelling it before sometimes tossing it aside. The newborn's arrival is clearly an event of profound significance to the entire group. For hours afterward, family members cluster around the calf and mother, touching, rumbling, and creating a protective barrier against potential threats. The calf's first challenge is learning to nurse. The mother's mammary glands are located between her front legs, not in the most intuitive place for a newborn to find. Initial attempts can be comically clumsy, with the calf bumping against its mother's legs and trunk, searching for milk. Eventually, guided by scent and maternal nudging, the calf finds its target and begins to nurse. That first milk, the colostrum, is rich in antibodies and nutrients, providing crucial immune protection and sustenance. For the first year or two of life, the calf stays extremely close to its mother, rarely straying more than a few meters away. It walks beneath or beside her, often touching her with its trunk, taking comfort in constant physical contact. The mother and alamothers guide the calf continuously, helping it navigate obstacles, keeping it away from dangers, and gently correcting its behavior when necessary. Young elephants are intensely curious and playful, traits that will serve them well as learning tools. They investigate everything, touching novel objects with their trunks, tasting different plants, testing their strength against bushes and saplings. They play with other calves, engaging in mock fights, chasing games, and trunk wrestling. These play behaviors aren't just entertainment, they're practice for adult life, building strength, coordination, and social skills. One of the most endearing sights in elephant society is watching a young calf struggle with trunk control. That marvelous appendage, which will become their most important tool, is initially more hindrance than help. Calves step on their own trunks, trip over them, and seem uncertain about what to do with them. They sometimes suck their trunks for comfort, much like human babies suck their thumbs. Gradually, through constant practice and observation of adults, they develop coordination and control. Weaning is a gradual process that may not be complete until the calf is 4 or 5 years old, or even longer. Even after they can eat solid food reliably, young elephants continue to nurse for comfort and supplemental nutrition. A mother may continue to tolerate nursing until she gives birth to her next calf, at which point she'll more actively discourage the older siblings' attempts. This extended period of dependency allows for extensive learning. Elephant knowledge isn't instinctual. It's acquired through observation, experimentation, and teaching. Young elephants learn which plants are edible, which are poisonous, which are medicinal. They learn where to find water in different seasons, which routes are safe, how to interact with other elephants, and how to respond to various threats. This accumulated knowledge takes years to acquire and is essential for survival. By around 8 to 10 years old, elephants enter a juvenile phase. They're becoming more independent, spending time with peers, and exploring more widely, but still under family supervision. Female juveniles often begin taking on alamothering roles, helping care for younger siblings and cousins. Male juveniles start displaying more boisterous behavior, testing boundaries and engaging in play fights that are rougher and more competitive than those of younger calves. Sexual maturity arrives around 12 to 14 years for females, though they typically don't give birth to their first calf until around 14 to 16 years old. This delay allows them to reach sufficient size and strength to successfully carry a pregnancy and nurture a calf. For males, sexual maturity also arrives around 12 to 14 years, but they won't have real mating opportunities until much older, when they're large enough to compete with mature males. This is when male elephants typically leave their natal families. The transition can be gradual or sudden, depending on individual personality and family dynamics. Some young males drift away peacefully, maintaining occasional contact with their families. Others are actively pushed out by increasingly intolerant females. Either way, by their mid-teens, males have embarked on their independent lives. Adulthood for female elephants means full integration into family responsibilities. They give birth approximately every 4 to 5 years if conditions are favorable. Each pregnancy and calf represents a major investment of time and energy, but also strengthens social bonds and contributes to family stability. Adult females form the stable core of elephant society, their relationships often spanning decades. Adult males, as we've discussed, follow a different path. They grow larger than females, a difference that becomes more pronounced with age. A mature male may be 50% heavier than a mature female. This size advantage is crucial for male-male competition. Males continue to grow throughout much of their lives, and the largest, oldest males are truly impressive, standing well over 3 meters at the shoulder and weighing 6,000 kilograms or more. As elephants age, they face increasing challenges. Their teeth wear down over time, a serious problem for animals that must consume massive quantities of abrasive vegetation. Elephants have a remarkable adaptation to this problem. Unlike most mammals, which have 2 sets of teeth, elephants have 6 sets of molars that develop sequentially throughout their lives. As one set wears down, it's pushed forward and eventually falls out, while a new set grows in from behind. This tooth replacement continues until around 60 years of age, by which point the final set is in place. Once these last molars wear down, the elephant can no longer process food efficiently. Malnutrition becomes inevitable, leading to weakness and vulnerability to disease and predation. In the wild, tooth wear is often the factor that ultimately determines lifespan. Old elephants are easily recognized. Their skin hangs more loosely, their backs may sag, and they move with deliberate slowness. But with age comes wisdom. Old matriarchs possess irreplaceable knowledge. Old males may become more solitary, sometimes seeking out specific areas with softer vegetation they can still process. There's a dignity to these ancient elephants, survivors of decades of droughts, floods, diseases, and the ever-present threat of human violence. When death comes, whether from old age, disease, injury, or human causes, it marks not just the end of an individual, but a loss felt throughout their social network. The family's response to the death of a member, particularly a matriarch, can be profound. They may remain with the body for extended periods, touching it gently with their trunks, vocalizing softly, seeming to express grief or at least profound disturbance at this fundamental change. The loss of a matriarch can destabilize a family for years. her accumulated knowledge is gone. Her decision-making authority must be transferred to another female, typically her oldest daughter or sister. But this transition isn't always smooth. Families that lose their matriarchs to poaching often fragment, with different factions splitting off and the previously cohesive unit dissolving. The ripples from a single death can extend across decades and affect entire populations. Understanding the elephant life cycle, from the moment of birth through the long years of learning and maturity to old age and death, reveals the profound investment these animals make in each individual. Every elephant represents decades of accumulated knowledge, complex social relationships, and ecological importance. The death of an elephant, particularly an old, experienced individual, is a genuine loss, not just to that elephant's family, but to the entire ecosystem. If you were to observe elephants in the wild, one activity would dominate your observations: eating, or more precisely, the endless, methodical, time-consuming process of feeding. Adult elephants spend approximately 16 to 18 hours each day foraging and eating. That's up to 75% of their waking hours devoted entirely to the acquisition and consumption of food. This massive time investment reflects a simple biological reality. Elephants are enormous, and that size requires fuel. An adult elephant needs to consume between 150 and 300 kilograms of vegetation every single day. That's roughly 300 to 600 pounds, a quantity almost incomprehensible until you watch an elephant actually eating and realize how little nutritional value comes from each mouthful of grass or leaves. The problem is efficiency, or rather, the lack of it. Elephants are hindgut fermenters with a digestive system that's remarkably inefficient. They extract only about 40 to 44% of the nutrients from what they eat. The rest passes through largely undigested, emerging in enormous dung piles that become mini ecosystems in their own right. But that's a story for another section. This inefficiency isn't a design flaw, it's a trade-off. Efficient digestion takes time. Ruminants like cows have multi-chambered stomachs and spend hours ruminating, chewing their cud, breaking down plant material slowly and thoroughly. Elephants can't afford that time investment. Instead, they process food quickly, extracting what they can, and simply eating more to compensate. This strategy works because they're large enough to carry the bulky digestive system required and can access a wider variety of plant foods than more specialized grazers or browsers. What exactly do elephants eat? The answer is almost anything plant-based they can access. Elephants are true generalists, consuming hundreds of different plant species. Their diet includes grasses, herbs, leaves, bark, twigs, roots, fruits, flowers, and even wood. The specific composition varies by species, season, habitat, and availability. African savanna elephants are often described as mixed feeders. In areas with abundant grass, particularly during wet seasons, when grass is lush and green, they graze extensively. They use their trunks to pull up clumps of grass, shake off excess dirt, and stuff the vegetation into their mouths. In drier seasons, or in areas with less grass, they switch to browsing, stripping leaves from bushes and trees, breaking off branches, and pulling down entire saplings to access foliage. One of their favorite foods is tree bark, which provides both nutrients and fiber that aids digestion. To access bark, elephants use their tusks, wedging them under the bark and prying it away from the wood. They can completely wring a tree, stripping bark from the entire circumference, which often kills the tree. This behavior shapes landscapes, creating open areas where previously there were thickets and providing habitat for species that thrive in more open conditions. African forest elephants, living in the dense shadows of the rainforest, have become fruit specialists. They seek out fruiting trees, consuming prodigious quantities when fruits are available. Their intimate knowledge of their home range includes detailed mental maps of where different trees are located and when they typically bear fruit. During fruit scarcity, they shift to leaves, bark, and the soft inner tissues of certain plants. Asian elephants show the most dietary flexibility, ranging from heavy grass consumption in some populations to almost exclusive browsing in others. In Myanmar, studies of working elephants revealed that during the wet season, their diet consisted primarily of fresh grass. In the dry season, they shifted to browse, consuming leaves, twigs, and bark from dozens of tree species. In agricultural areas, Asian elephants have learned that human crops often provide more nutritious, easier to process food than wild vegetation, leading to frequent crop raiding and human-elephant conflict. Elephants are selective feeders despite their massive consumption. They don't just eat any plant they encounter. They choose specific species, specific parts of plants, and even specific individual plants based on nutritional content, palatability, and the presence or absence of defensive compounds. Many plants produce toxic or unpalatable chemicals to deter herbivores. Elephants, with their acute sense of smell, can detect these compounds and generally avoid plants with high concentrations. However, they also have saliva proteins that can bind to and neutralize tannins, allowing them to tolerate these compounds better than many other herbivores. The mechanics of elephant feeding are fascinating to observe. The trunk does most of the work. When eating grass, an elephant might scrape the ground with a forefoot to create a small pile, then sweep the pile into its mouth with its trunk. When browsing, it uses the trunk's dexterity to select specific leaves or branches, sometimes stripping leaves by running the trunk along a branch, sometimes snapping off entire twigs. When processing bark, the elephant inserts bark strips into its mouth and scrapes them against its molars, while simultaneously using a twisting motion with the trunk to tear the bark free. Water is as essential as food, perhaps more so. Elephants need to drink regularly, typically consuming 68 to 98 litres per day, though they can drink much more, up to 200 litres in a single session. They drink by sucking water up into their trunks, holding up to 8 litres at a time, then curling the trunk toward their mouths and squirting the water in. The process is repeated many times until their thirst is satisfied. During droughts, when surface water disappears, elephants become critical ecosystem engineers. They use their tusks and feet to dig into dry riverbeds, excavating holes that reach underground water. These elephant dug wells become lifelines, not just for the elephants, but for countless other species. Zebras, wildebeest, antelope, predators, birds, all benefit from the water. Elephants make accessible. Without elephants, many of these species would struggle to survive dry periods. Elephants also engage in a behavior called geophagy, deliberately consuming soil. This isn't accidental ingestion from eating roots or grass. It's intentional, targeted consumption of specific types of soil. In some regions, elephants visit particular sites, sometimes cliffs or caves, where they dig into the earth and consume the exposed minerals. These sites are rich in salts and minerals like sodium, calcium, and potassium, which may be scarce in their plant-based diet. The minerals might also help neutralize plant toxins or aid digestion. The nutritional needs of elephants vary by age, sex, and reproductive status. Pregnant and lactating females have particularly high nutritional demands. Producing milk for a calf requires enormous energy, and mothers often lose condition during the nursing period. Males in musth also have elevated nutritional needs, fueling their heightened metabolism and activity levels. Growing juveniles need diets rich in protein to support their rapid growth. Seasonal changes dramatically affect food availability and quality. In many elephant habitats, there's a distinct wet and dry season. During wet seasons, vegetation is abundant, lush, and relatively nutritious. Elephants can be more selective, choosing the best foods and maintaining good body condition. During dry seasons, food becomes scarce and less nutritious. Elephants must spend even more time foraging, travel longer distances to find adequate food, and often lose weight despite their efforts. These seasonal challenges are where the matriarch's knowledge becomes critical. She remembers where to find food during different times of year, which routes lead to reliable resources, and how to navigate periods of scarcity. Her experience can mean the difference between her family thriving or suffering, between calves surviving or perishing. Elephants also modify their feeding behavior based on competition and danger. In areas with high elephant densities, competition for food increases, forcing them to spend more time feeding and travel farther to find adequate resources. In areas with high predator densities or human threats, elephants may alter their feeding schedules, becoming more nocturnal to reduce danger, though this limits feeding time and can compromise nutrition. The dung that results from all this feeding is produced in prodigious quantities. An adult elephant can produce up to 150 kilograms of dung per day. This dung is far from waste. It's a mobile ecosystem and, as we'll explore more in the next section, plays a crucial role in seed dispersal and nutrient cycling. Understanding elephant feeding ecology helps explain why habitat protection is so crucial for conservation. Elephants need large areas to meet their nutritional needs. They can't survive in small, isolated patches. They need access to diverse plant communities that provide different resources in different seasons. They need reliable water sources year-round. When human development fragments and shrinks their habitat, elephants lose access to the varied foods and water sources they need, often bringing them into conflict with humans as they venture into farms and villages searching for sustenance. Imagine a landscape without elephants. The forests would be denser, more tangled, with less light reaching the forest floor. The savannas would have more trees and shrubs, less open grassland, fewer waterholes. The distribution of plant species would be different, more localized, less diverse. Countless animal species that depend on the structure elephants create, on the seeds they disperse, on the water they unearth, would struggle or disappear. This isn't speculation. It's based on observations from areas where elephants have been lost, and, more optimistically, from areas where elephants have returned. Elephants aren't just inhabitants of their ecosystems. They're architects, sculptors, engineers who fundamentally shape the landscapes they inhabit. They're what ecologists call a keystone species, a species whose impact on the ecosystem is disproportionate to its numbers. Let's start with the most visible impact: habitat modification. When elephants feed, they don't just consume plants. They knock down trees, break branches, uproot shrubs, and create paths through dense vegetation. This might sound destructive, and in a sense it is. But destruction can also be creation. By knocking down trees, elephants create openings in forest canopies, allowing sunlight to reach the ground. New plants germinate in these gaps, creating a mosaic of habitats at different successional stages. In savannas, elephants prevent bush encroachment. Without elephants, many African savannas would transform into woodland, with trees and shrubs becoming so dense that grasslands virtually disappear. This would fundamentally change the ecosystem, favoring different species and eliminating habitat for grassland specialists. Elephants, by pushing over trees, stripping bark, and generally keeping woody vegetation in check, maintain the open structure that defines savanna ecosystems. This vegetation modification creates habitat heterogeneity, a diversity of microhabitats within the broader landscape. Some species thrive in dense forest. Others prefer open grassland. Still, others need intermediate conditions. By creating a range of conditions, elephants increase the number of niches available, supporting greater biodiversity. Studies have shown that landscapes with elephants typically support more species of plants, insects, birds, and mammals than similar landscapes without elephants. The paths elephants create are themselves important habitat features. Elephants are creatures of habit, often following the same routes repeatedly. Over time, these routes become well-worn paths that other animals use as corridors for movement. During wet seasons, these paths may fill with water, creating linear wetlands that provide breeding habitat for frogs and insects. In dry seasons, they become travel routes where visibility is good and movement is easy, utilized by countless species. Water creation is another critical role. As we've mentioned, elephants dig for water during droughts, creating water holes that sustain entire communities. But elephants also create water indirectly. In some wetland habitats, elephants dig mud wallows where they bathe and cool themselves. These wallows fill with water, creating small ponds that persist even when surrounding areas dry out. These ponds become refuges for aquatic species and attract terrestrial animals to drink. Perhaps the most important ecological role elephants play, one that's becoming increasingly recognized, is seed dispersal. When elephants eat fruits, they consume the seeds whole. These seeds pass through the elephant's digestive system, which can take 24 to 48 hours or even longer. During this time, the elephant may travel dozens of kilometers. When the seeds finally emerge in the elephant's dung, they're often far from the parent tree, deposited in a pile of nutrient-rich fertilizer that provides an ideal germination environment. This long-distance seed dispersal is crucial for many plant species. Some trees produce fruits specifically to attract elephants, with tough seeds designed to survive gut passage. Without elephants, these trees' seeds would fall directly beneath the parent, where they face intense competition and reduced survival. With elephants, seeds are scattered widely, colonizing new areas and maintaining genetic diversity within plant populations. Research has revealed that elephants disperse seeds for hundreds of plant species. Some of these plants, particularly large-seeded species, have no other effective dispersers. Elephants are essentially the only species capable of carrying these large seeds the distances needed for successful colonization. If elephants disappear, these plant species may persist for a time, but they'll gradually decline, unable to expand their ranges or establish new populations. The implications extend to carbon storage and climate change. Many of the trees elephants favor for their fruits, and whose seeds they disperse, are large, long-lived species with dense wood. These trees store substantial amounts of carbon. By dispersing their seeds and facilitating their spread, elephants help these high carbon storage trees dominate forest composition. Models suggest that the loss of forest elephants in Africa could lead to a significant reduction in carbon storage in Central African forests, potentially releasing enormous quantities of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Elephant dung itself is an ecosystem. Fresh elephant dung is warm, moist, and nutrient-rich, an irresistible attractant for dung beetles. Within minutes of defecation, dung beetles arrive, some rolling balls of dung away to bury and lay eggs in, others burrowing directly into the pile. Dozens of beetle species specialize on elephant dung, and they can process an entire dung pile within days. In doing so, they bury organic matter and nutrients, enriching the soil and making those nutrients available to plants. But dung beetles aren't the only beneficiaries. Birds like spurfowl and francolins pick through dung piles, eating undigested seeds and insects. Baboons and other primates investigate dung piles, looking for partially digested fruits and seeds. That undigested plant material provides food for various invertebrates, which in turn feed other species. A single elephant dung pile might support dozens of species in a complex web of interactions. Elephants also play roles in nutrient cycling beyond their dung. When they knock down trees, that dead wood becomes habitat for termites, fungi, and countless other decomposers. These organisms break down the wood, releasing nutrients locked in the plant tissue back into the soil. Without elephants, large trees would only fall when they died of natural causes or were toppled by storms, a much slower process. With elephants accelerating this turnover, nutrients cycle more rapidly through the ecosystem. The concept of elephants as ecosystem engineers extends to less visible impacts. Elephants create mineral licks, excavated sites where they dig for salts and minerals. These licks are used by many other species, providing access to nutrients that would otherwise be locked beneath the surface. The holes elephants dig when excavating for roots or water create microhabitats that fill with water, providing breeding sites for amphibians and insects. Even after death, elephants continue to shape their ecosystems. An elephant carcass represents an enormous input of nutrients, thousands of kilograms of organic matter concentrated in one spot. Scavengers, from vultures to hyenas to beetles, converge on carcasses, stripping flesh, cracking bones, and dispersing bits of the elephant across the landscape. The nutrients from that single elephant might feed hundreds of other organisms. The bones persist long after the flesh is gone, becoming microhabitats in their own right. Insects colonize the porous bone tissue. Small mammals shelter in the ribcage. Minerals leach from the bones into the soil, creating a localized nutrient hotspot where vegetation grows more lushly. It can take years for an elephant skeleton to decompose completely, and throughout that time, it provides resources to the ecosystem. Understanding elephants as ecosystem engineers reveals why their conservation is so critical. When we lose elephants, we don't just lose a charismatic species. We lose the functions they perform, the habitats they create, the countless species that depend on them. Ecosystems can persist without elephants, but they fundamentally change, often becoming less diverse, less resilient, less capable of supporting the complex webs of life that existed when elephants were present. This ecological importance extends to climate change mitigation. By facilitating the growth and spread of high carbon storage trees, elephants help forests capture and store atmospheric carbon. By maintaining open savannas and preventing bush encroachment, they help preserve grasslands that also store carbon in their extensive root systems. By digging for water and creating water holes, they help maintain wetlands that are crucial carbon sinks. In essence, protecting elephants means protecting entire ecosystems. It means preserving the complex, co-evolved relationships between elephants and thousands of other species. It means maintaining ecosystem functions that humans depend on, from watershed protection to climate regulation. Elephants aren't just animals sharing our planet. They're critical partners in maintaining the living systems that sustain all life, including human life. On a warm October day in 2003, in Kenya's Samburu National Reserve, a female elephant named Eleanor collapsed. Eleanor was a matriarch, leader of a family group researchers had been studying for years. She struggled to stand but couldn't. Another elephant, Grace, a matriarch from a different family, approached. Grace tried to help Eleanor to her feet, using her tusks to lift, her trunk to push, vocalizing urgently. Eleanor fell back. Grace stayed, agitated, refusing to leave. Eventually, Eleanor's own family arrived, surrounding her, touching her gently, rumbling softly. Eleanor died the next day. For more than a week afterward, elephants from 5 different families visited her body. They touched her with their trunks, particularly her head and tusks. Some stood silently nearby for long periods. A female named Maui seemed particularly affected, staying close to the body, rocking over it, prodding it gently with her trunk, as if trying to rouse Eleanor. This wasn't an isolated incident. Researchers have documented similar behaviors across elephant populations. The pattern is consistent. Elephants show profound interest in their dead, particularly when the deceased is someone they knew. They investigate bodies, touch bones, and show behaviors that, in humans, we would unhesitatingly call mourning. But can we really say elephants mourn? Can we attribute emotions like grief to non-human animals? These questions touch on deep philosophical issues about consciousness, emotion, and the nature of subjective experience. We can never know precisely what another being, human or elephant, truly feels. But we can observe behavior, measure physiological responses, and make inferences based on similarities to our own experiences. The case for elephant emotion is compelling. They have brain structures, particularly in the limbic system, associated with emotion in humans. The temporal lobes of elephant brains, regions linked to emotional processing, are highly developed. Their behavioral responses to death show consistency and complexity that's hard to explain without invoking emotional states. When elephants encounter the bones of deceased elephants, they don't just glance and move on. They stop, investigate, touch the bones, sometimes carry them for considerable distances. They show particular interest in skulls and tusks, the parts that would have been most familiar during life through trunk-to-mouth greetings. They can apparently recognize bones from individuals they knew, showing different responses to familiar versus unfamiliar remains. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from responses to dying or injured herd members. Healthy elephants will support injured companions, trying to help them stand, slowing their pace to accommodate them, bringing them food and water. When an elephant gives birth to a stillborn calf, the mother may carry the body, trying to lift it, refusing to leave it, even when the family moves on. Other females sometimes join her, creating a vigil around the deceased infant. These behaviors suggest more than simple curiosity or instinctive responses. They suggest empathy, the capacity to recognize and respond to the emotional states of others. Elephants appear to understand when another elephant is distressed and respond with comforting behaviors. They've been observed consoling agitated or frightened elephants, using trunk touches and gentle vocalizations. One remarkable study played recordings of distressed elephant calls to groups of elephants. The elephants responded with clear signs of concern, approaching the speakers, bunching together protectively, and producing vocalizations that in other contexts are associated with reassurance and bonding. They responded to the distress of an elephant they couldn't even see, suggesting they were reacting to the emotional content of the calls rather than simply to a specific individual's distress. But grief and empathy are just part of elephants' emotional repertoire. They also clearly experience joy. Anyone who has watched elephants greeting each other after a separation can see it. They rumble, trumpet, spin in circles, flap their ears, and entwine trunks in displays of obvious excitement and happiness. Young elephants at play, running and splashing in water, chasing each other, seem to embody joy in its purest form. Elephants also show what appears to be compassion, extending beyond their own species. There are documented cases of elephants helping other animals in distress. In one instance, elephants surrounded a baby rhinoceros stuck in mud, preventing the mother rhino from charging while attempting to help the calf, even though adult elephants and rhinoceros typically avoid each other. They can also show anger and hold grudges. Elephants that have been mistreated by humans often show long-lasting fear or aggression toward humans. In areas where elephants have been heavily poached, herds may attack humans on sight, even peaceful farmers who pose no direct threat. This behavior, sometimes called elephant rage, likely represents trauma responses, learned fear and aggression, passed culturally through generations. Elephants appear to recognize themselves as individuals, as evidenced by their passing the mirror test. They can distinguish between their own actions and those of others. They seem to have a sense of self, an awareness of their own existence as separate entities. This self-awareness is likely linked to their social cognition, the ability to model other minds and understand social relationships. The depth of elephant memory enhances their emotional lives. Because they remember individuals across years and decades, their relationships have history and continuity. An elephant doesn't just recognize another elephant. It remembers past interactions, shared experiences, conflicts, and reconciliations. This gives their relationships a richness and depth that would be impossible with short-term memory alone. Elephants also appear to show something like culture, socially learned behaviors, and knowledge that vary between populations. Different elephant groups have different traditions about which plants to eat, which areas to visit, how to respond to threats. These traditions are passed from old to young through observation and teaching, creating group identities and shared knowledge bases. Understanding elephants as emotional, intelligent beings has profound ethical implications. If elephants can suffer, feel grief, experience fear and joy. Then our treatment of them becomes a moral question, not just a practical one. The case for elephant conservation gains urgency when we recognize that we're not just preserving a species, but protecting beings capable of rich inner lives. Research into elephant cognition and emotion also reveals something humbling about human exceptionalism. For centuries, Western thought held that humans were fundamentally different from animals, that we alone possessed reason, emotion, self-awareness, culture. Each discovery in animal cognition challenges this assumption. Elephants, along with great apes, cetaceans, corvids, and others, demonstrate that the mental landscape of non-human animals is far richer and more complex than we once imagined. This doesn't mean elephants are just like humans. They're not. Their minds evolved to solve different problems in different environments, shaped by different selective pressures. But the similarities are striking enough to suggest that consciousness, emotion, and intelligence aren't uniquely human traits, but rather evolved multiple times in different lineages, creating diverse forms of awareness and experience. When we watch elephants mourning their dead, helping injured companions, teaching their young, playing together, communicating across kilometers, we are witnessing behaviors that resonate deeply with our own experiences. We see reflections of ourselves, not because elephants are trying to be like humans, but because we share common evolutionary heritage and face similar challenges of survival, reproduction, and navigating complex social worlds. The numbers are stark. In 1930, there were an estimated 10 million elephants in Africa. By 1979, there were 1.3 million. By 1989, just 600,000 remained. Today, approximately 400,000 African elephants survive, split between savanna and forest species. Asian elephants number fewer than 50,000, occupying just 15% of their historic range. 3 species, millions of years of evolutionary history, countless generations of accumulated knowledge and culture, reduced to remnant populations clinging to survival in an increasingly human-dominated world. How did we get here? The answer is complex, involving centuries of exploitation, habitat destruction, and cultural practices that value elephant parts over living elephants. But understanding the threats elephants face is crucial for developing effective conservation strategies. The most visible and visceral threat is poaching. For centuries, humans have killed elephants for their ivory, that creamy white material that can be carved and polished into beautiful objects. Tusks are dentine, modified teeth, but they've been treated as precious materials, symbols of status and wealth. The demand for ivory has driven cycles of massacre that have decimated elephant populations repeatedly throughout history. The most recent and severe poaching crisis began around 2010, driven primarily by demand in Asia, particularly China, where a growing wealthy class sought ivory as a status symbol, and traditional carvings, poaching rates skyrocketed. Between 2010 and 2012, an estimated 100,000 African elephants were killed for their tusks. That's more than 30,000 per year, far exceeding the natural population growth rate of around 4 to 5% annually. The impact wasn't uniformly distributed. Some populations were hit harder than others. Forest elephants, living in dense, remote areas with weak law enforcement, suffered catastrophically. Between 2002 and 2011, forest elephant populations declined by 62%. Entire populations were wiped out. In some regions, elephants disappeared from 30% of their historic range. the methods poachers use are brutal. Often, they use high-powered weapons, sometimes automatic rifles, to kill elephants quickly before rangers can respond. They hack off the faces to remove the tusks, leaving the rest of the carcass to rot. The victims are often the oldest, largest elephants with the most impressive tusks, individuals who are typically matriarchs and experienced males, the repositories of crucial knowledge for their families and herds. The social impacts of poaching extend beyond immediate mortality. When matriarchs are killed, families fragment, losing their leadership and accumulated knowledge. Orphaned calves, particularly those younger than 2 years, rarely survive without their mothers. Even older juveniles suffer reduced survival without family support. Traumatized elephants show behavioral changes, becoming more aggressive toward humans, more fearful, less likely to use traditional routes and areas where they might be vulnerable. Some populations are showing evolutionary responses. In areas with intense poaching pressure, tusklessness, a trait that was once rare, is becoming more common, particularly in females. In one Mozambican population, the proportion of tuskless females increased from around 18% before heavy poaching to over 30% afterward. While this adaptation may help elephants survive poachers, it also means they're losing tools essential for survival, potentially reducing their long-term fitness. International efforts to combat ivory trade have had mixed results. In 1989, CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, banned international ivory trade. Poaching rates dropped dramatically. But in 1997 and 2008, CITES authorized one-time ivory sales, allowing stockpiled ivory from several African countries to be sold to Japan and China. Critics argue these sales reignited demand and legitimized ivory ownership, contributing to the surge in poaching that followed. More recently, some progress has been made. In 2017, China banned domestic ivory sales, a significant step given that China was believed to be the world's largest ivory market. Poaching rates in several key elephant populations have since declined. In Tanzania's Selous ecosystem and Kenya's Tsavo ecosystem, both heavily impacted by poaching, elephant numbers have stabilized and begun recovering. However, poaching remains a serious threat in many areas, particularly in Central Africa. Habitat loss represents a slower but equally serious threat. As human populations grow, natural habitats are converted to agriculture, settlements, and infrastructure. Forests are cleared for timber and farmland. Grasslands are cultivated or grazed by livestock. Roads, railways, canals, and fences fragment remaining habitat into isolated patches. For elephants, which need large areas to meet their food and water requirements, habitat fragmentation is particularly problematic. Elephants have traditionally migrated seasonally, moving to areas with better resources as conditions change. When migration routes are blocked by human development, elephants can become trapped in areas where resources are insufficient, leading to malnutrition, increased mortality, and population declines. Habitat loss also brings elephants into closer contact with humans, leading to human-elephant conflict. When elephants venture into agricultural areas, they can destroy entire crops in a single night. A field of maize or rice is far more nutritious and easier to harvest than wild vegetation, and elephants quickly learn to exploit these resources. For farmers, often living at subsistence levels, such losses are catastrophic, wiping out months of work and threatening their families' food security. In response, farmers may kill elephants using poison, traps, or weapons. While many countries legally protect elephants, enforcement in rural areas is often weak, and farmers, desperate to protect their livelihoods, resort to lethal methods. Such retaliatory killings, while numerically smaller than organized poaching, represent significant threats in some areas and erode local support for conservation. Human-elephant conflict also results in human casualties. Elephants, particularly males and traumatized individuals, sometimes attack humans. People are killed and injured every year in elephant encounters, creating fear and resentment toward elephants in affected communities. Climate change represents an emerging threat whose full impact remains uncertain. Changing rainfall patterns, increased drought frequency, and shifting vegetation zones will all affect elephants. Elephants are already living at the limits of what their environments can support in many areas. As climate change makes these environments less productive or more variable, elephant populations may decline further. Diseases also threaten elephants, though historically they've been less important than poaching and habitat loss. However, there's concern about emerging diseases, particularly those that might jump from domestic animals or from other wildlife. Tuberculosis, anthrax, and herpes virus have all been documented in elephant populations, sometimes causing significant mortality. Despite these threats, there are reasons for hope. Conservation efforts have proven successful in many areas. Well-protected populations in southern Africa, particularly in Botswana's Okavango Delta and surrounding areas, have thrived. The Kaiser Transfrontier Conservation Area, spanning 5 countries and protecting around 225,000 elephants, represents the largest contiguous elephant population and demonstrates what's possible with international cooperation. Anti-poaching efforts have become more sophisticated, utilizing technology including drones, camera traps, and rapid response teams to detect and deter poachers. Community-based conservation programs that provide benefits to local people from living elephants, whether through tourism revenue, employment, or other mechanisms, have shown promise in reducing conflict and building local support for conservation. Innovative solutions to human-elephant conflict are being developed and deployed. These include early warning systems that alert farmers when elephants approach, allowing them to take protective measures without harming elephants. Beehive fences exploit elephants' fear of bees, creating barriers that elephants generally avoid. Crop protection using chili peppers, which elephants dislike, has shown effectiveness in some areas. Compensation schemes that reimburse farmers for elephant damage help reduce retaliatory killings. Habitat corridors that connect isolated elephant populations are being established, allowing elephants to move between protected areas and maintaining genetic diversity. These corridors, sometimes as simple as agreements not to develop certain land parcels, can dramatically improve conservation outcomes by preventing population isolation. Research continues to deepen our understanding of elephants, their needs, and how to protect them effectively. Long-term studies provide invaluable data on population dynamics, social structure, and ecological roles. Genetic studies help identify distinct populations and guide management decisions. Veterinary programs treat injured and sick elephants, improving survival rates. Critically, conservation efforts are increasingly recognizing that elephant conservation isn't just about protecting elephants. It's about protecting entire ecosystems and supporting the human communities that share landscapes with elephants. Effective conservation must address human needs alongside wildlife needs, finding ways for people and elephants to coexist. Education and awareness play crucial roles. By helping people understand elephant intelligence, emotions, and ecological importance, conservation organizations build public support for protection efforts and funding. Documentary films, social media campaigns, and educational programs reach millions, changing attitudes toward elephants and wildlife conservation more broadly. International cooperation is essential. Elephants don't respect national borders, and neither does the ivory trade. Conservation requires coordination between range states, transit countries, and consumer nations. It requires funding from wealthy nations to support protection efforts in range states. It requires diplomatic efforts to combat wildlife crime and strengthen legal frameworks. The future of elephants hangs in the balance. They face unprecedented threats, but also unprecedented awareness and concern. The decisions we make in the coming decades will determine whether our descendants live in a world with elephants, or one where they're reduced to museum specimens and historical footnotes. The challenge is immense, but the alternative, a world without elephants, is unthinkable. As our journey through the world of elephants draws to a close, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've discovered. We've explored 3 distinct species, each adapted to its own corner of the world, each irreplaceable. We've marveled at the trunk, that boneless appendage that functions as nose, hand, snorkel, weapon, and tender caress all at once. We've delved into the elephant mind, discovering intelligence that rivals our own in complexity, memory that spans decades, and problem-solving abilities that speak to genuine understanding. We've witnessed the intricate social bonds that structure elephant lives, the matriarchal families where knowledge passes from generation to generation, where young learn from old, where cooperation and mutual support allow survival in challenging environments. We've followed the elephant life cycle from the moment of birth, after an almost 2-year pregnancy, through the playful years of childhood, into the responsibilities of adulthood, and finally to old age and death, each stage marked by learning, relationships, and accumulated wisdom. We've observed their daily lives, those endless hours of feeding and foraging, the massive quantities of vegetation consumed, the constant search for water and minerals. We've discovered their roles as ecosystem engineers, shaping landscapes, dispersing seeds, creating habitats, supporting countless other species through their very presence and activities. We've confronted the emotional depths of elephants, their capacity for grief and joy, their empathy and compassion, their mourning of the dead, their celebrations of reunions, their complex inner lives that challenge our notions of what it means to be conscious and aware. And we've faced the harsh realities of the threats they encounter, the poaching that decimates populations, the habitat loss that shrinks their world, the conflict with humans that arises from our shared need for space and resources. Elephants are more than just the largest land animals. They're intelligent, emotional, socially complex beings with rich inner lives. They're ecosystem engineers whose presence shapes entire landscapes. They're repositories of knowledge, carrying memories that span decades and ecological wisdom accumulated over generations. They're survivors who have persisted through climatic upheavals, habitat changes, and increasing human pressures, but they cannot survive without us. Every elephant alive today exists at our mercy in landscapes we've fragmented, under threats we've created. Their future depends on choices we make, on whether we choose to share our planet with them or allow them to disappear into extinction. The good news is that we can make a difference. Supporting elephant conservation organizations helps fund anti-poaching patrols, habitat protection, and community-based conservation programs. Refusing to purchase ivory products eliminates demand that drives poaching. Supporting policies that protect wildlife and wild places creates the legal framework for conservation. Educating ourselves and others about elephants builds the public support necessary for long-term protection. Every action matters. Every voice raised in defense of elephants contributes to their survival. The elephants we share this planet with today are survivors, descendants of lineages that have persisted for millions of years. They've survived ice ages and climate changes, predators and diseases. They've adapted to deserts and forests, grasslands and mountains. But they may not survive us unless we choose to be their allies, rather than their destroyers. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, perhaps you'll dream of elephants, of trunks delicately plucking leaves, of families moving together through golden grasslands, of babies playing in water holes, of ancient matriarchs remembering paths traveled decades before. Perhaps you'll dream of a future where elephants still roam free, where their trumpets still echo across savannas, where forests still shake with their passing. That future is possible, but only if we make it so. Before we part ways tonight, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey through the world of elephants. If you found wonder in their intelligence, comfort in their family bonds, or inspiration in their resilience, consider supporting elephant conservation in whatever way you can. And if you'd like to continue exploring the quiet wonders of the natural world with me, please like this video, subscribe to Bedtime Biology, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, sleep well, dream deeply, and remember, we share this beautiful planet with extraordinary beings. Let's make sure we're worthy of their trust. Good night.